HAMBS acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. Alright, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this wonderful forum to celebrate International Women's Day, focusing obviously with the theme of balancing the scales, and we've got a very special invited guest, Alice Bacon, to help us with our topic today of accelerating your career. We're going to cover a few different topics here today, really focused on that particular lens, and I just want to thank you, Alice, for joining us today. She's done some leadership training programs with us previously and some coaching support with us here at HAMBS as well. So Alice, if I can quickly throw to you for a quick hello and intro.
Yeah, thank you, Talia. Hi everyone, I'm Alice Bacon, and just before we begin, I wanted to say how lovely it is to be part of this conversation for International Women's Day. Many of the topics, as you've seen, that we're talking about today are like imposter syndrome, biases, career growth. These are things that most people navigate quietly at some point in their careers. So it's really lovely to be able to bring this all together. As for me, as Talia has mentioned, I'm a leadership coach and facilitator, and I do work with individuals and teams really about building that greater self-awareness, that resilience and clarity, particularly during times of change and transition as well. So I really like to help people truly understand themselves so they can lead, work and live with clarity and ease, especially to get them through those challenging times. I often use tools like the Berkman method alongside emotional intelligence frameworks to really help people better understand how they show up, how they communicate, and how they can contribute, or how they do contribute within their teams and organisations. And my work is really focused on creating a safe space for thoughtful and honest conversations, whether that's around leadership, unconscious bias, self-advocacy, or how we grow and navigate our careers in a sustainable way. So I'm really looking forward to and excited about the conversations today, so thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alice, and welcome. Okay, well, we'll kick things off. So I guess just a quick bit of background and info. The theme for this year's International Women's Day is all about balancing the scales. So really focusing on equity over equality, I guess, is a key thing to point out. We obviously reference that as well as part of our DEI strategy as well, and the importance of, recognising that there is a gap currently, and we need to think about what we can do, how we can, to Alice's point before, how we can work on that self-awareness, our own strengths, to sort of build that gap as well, and what are some of those key areas of focus to enable bridging that gap in general as well.
Sorry to interrupt. We got someone on the chat. Alice, if you could turn your mic up a little bit.
Yeah, I've just turned it up. Is that better? Is that clearer? I've just turned it up.
A little bit, still a little bit distant, but
let's have a look. I will talk louder, but let me have a look.
Okay. Yeah. All right. We'll see how we go. We'll no problems. All right. So yes, with regards to this topic, so I guess what's been happening with HAMBS and our progress to date with this one as well. I did touch on this a little bit at ASM as well with regards to our ongoing commitment with WGEA. So that is the WGEA is basically a body that's formed, and we report on that regularly to sort of basically address what our actions and commitments are, but also for some visibility within the industry for comparison regarding the variances with regards to promotions and obviously the pay gap with women, which does still exist today. So the key insights from our previous survey with WGEA, there is still a pay gap. The industry norm is at 14%, is 14.9%. Is it 14%? And we're at 14.9%. Apologies. There's a bit of a delay with my data there. And so we are very close to that industry norm. but it does also illustrate that we've still got a little way to go. Interesting to see some of the other insights regarding the industry report was that we do have a more favourable mix with regards to our board composition more recently, and we have seen that shift recently, and we're above the median there. And we've also introduced our first female independent chair as well, which is a great news story. We do still have more work on bridging that gap for our female leaders in the workplace, was another key finding. So we definitely want to have that as a key area of focus. How do we enable our female leaders? How do we set them up for success? And how do we help them continue to grow? And how do we create those opportunities for them in the first place also? So that's probably a really nice segue to, I'd love to get your insights, Alice, with regards to, what do you think with regards to this topic in particular? What are some organisational mindsets and behaviours that you think may have unintentionally contributed to pay inequities in general?
Yeah, and thank you, Talia. I think that's a really good way, as you said, unintentionally. So in my experience, most equities aren't sustained by bad intent. They often continue because of those unexamined behaviours or habits. There are a few mindsets that can maintain pay gaps. And, some of the things that we quite often hear is this is just how things have always been done, or when we've got limitations with legacy systems or historical decisions go unquestioned. Inequities can simply carry forward without anyone intentionally maintaining them. And there's another is confusing confidence with competence. People who naturally promote themselves or speak very assertively, as we know, are often rewarded, while equally capable people who contribute in quieter ways can sometimes be overlooked. So there is a tendency to equate visibility with value. Work that is relational, supportive, or happens behind the scenes is often the work that women take on. Sometimes males as well, but predominantly women. And that work is incredibly important, but can be undervalued because it is less visible or harder to measure. And then sometimes the decisions are made based on assumptions about someone's availability or commitment, particularly around caregiving, and rather than coming forward and having that open conversation with the person involved to really understand what it looks like for them. And finally, there's also avoidance of uncomfortable conversations because it is uncomfortable. Pay transparency does require courage, and some organisations, those conversations are avoided simply because of an effort to maintain harmony, but silence can unintentionally protect that inequity. So as you said, the behaviour that sustains inequity most is often unintentionally, which is inattention. When leaders are curious, when they're willing to listen and open to being challenged, that's where meaningful change can really start to begin.
Great. Yeah, really great insights. Thank you, Alice. And it's interesting, I know you do see, I've got some additional stats for this as we go on as well, but it's really interesting just to know that some of it's just that own emotional awareness, as a woman sometimes to speak up in those scenarios as well, to bring light to that, can feel really unnatural for many of us as well. And so equipping ourselves with the awareness, the information that we have in order to have those meaningful conversations, I think that's a great call out for sure. I'm interested as well. I wonder if one of the other considerations in that as well is the real issue with imposter syndrome in general. We talk about it, but do we really advocate enough awareness regarding imposter syndrome in general? Is it a real inhabitant? I remember there was a stat from KPMG survey recently that I think it was between 75% and 90% of women in STEM have admitted that they suffer from imposter syndrome at some point in time. So, Alice, I'm really keen to get your thoughts on, your own self-journey and reflections with regards to imposter syndrome.
Yeah, so in my experience and for me, imposter syndrome showed up when I really didn't know how to respond to that internal discomfort that comes with being stretched or stepping into that unfamiliar territory. So earlier in my career, it wasn't so much that I lacked capability, it was more that I didn't yet have the self-awareness to understand what I needed in order to navigate the situation or move forward with confidence. So for a lot of us, when we feel uncomfortable in an environment and when we're unsure how to respond, the first thing that naturally surfaces for us is doubt. And that tends to happen when we're being asked to draw on skills that we're still developing, or we're still stepping into roles and spaces while we're still discovering how our own strengths show up. Interestingly, what I see most strongly is very capable and creative people. They don't always see the end point clearly, and it's often that lack of clarity that creates the tension, not the lack of ability. And what's helped me over time was developing that stronger self-awareness and understanding how I respond under pressure, what support I need so I can call it out, and trusting that growth often happens in those moments when we're still figuring things out, or when we're feeling some form of resistance, but we still have the courage to go forward. And a question that I've asked myself or other people can ask in those moments is, what do I actually need right now to move this forward? And often the answer isn't more capability, it's generally more clarity. What we call imposter syndrome, it's good to be reminded, it's simply the discomfort of stepping into a version of ourselves that we're still becoming. And it's only when we do have the courage and the faith and the confidence to go forward that we can have that self-realization about ourselves, which is really important in our growth, but also in our collaboration, in our building relationships with others as well.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, you're right, and it does often coincide when there's been some kind of significant change in general. You've moved into a new position, a new role, a new workplace, and that can naturally bring a level of uncertainty in general. I guess when we think about how we can be courageous during those times, especially, and I guess I'd love your thoughts also on how you think we can be and get advocates for ourselves when that imposter syndrome creeps up, to sort of advocate for your ambitions in a way that feels authentic. What would you think? What are your views there?
Yeah, so for myself personally, for a long time I never saw myself naturally as someone with strong or who was strong at self-advocacy. For me, I was more comfortable helping others find that clarity than stepping forward myself. And what really shifted for me was going through my own life and career transitions. So Talia, during those times, I had to really be more honest about who I was, what mattered to me, and where I might have been unintentionally holding myself back rather than thinking it was somebody else that was responsible for my career or my growth. And that self-awareness really became the foundation for me. So when you start to understand your patterns, where you might doubt yourself, or where we even wait for permission, you can start to begin to make more conscious choices rather than those default ones. And I also found that imposter syndrome can often minimize when we reconnect with our purpose and the reason that we care about the work that we do. So having that conversation with ourselves and other people, shifting our focus from do I deserve this to what am I here to contribute? Self-advocacy starts to feel less like self-promotion and more like a responsibility. If I can just share a few things that help me that might support other people as well is, if you have a meeting, prepare for the important conversations rather than hoping to find the words in that moment. Speaking about the value and the impact of your work, we quite often focus on the effort and letting go of the idea that you need to be completely ready before stepping forward. Part of getting ready is not ready stepping forward, and asking for opportunities with curiosity rather than apologies, because sometimes we unintentionally minimize ourselves with our own language. We say things like, this might be a silly question, or I know I'm probably not ready for this yet. Where if we can apply curiosity and, say things like, I'm interested in developing in this area. What would be the best way to get involved? Or, I would love to contribute to something like this. What experience would you recommend that I build? So for me, authentic advocacy isn't loud. It's not performative. It's very grounded. It's very relational, and it's very intentional. And when your inner understanding aligns with your outward actions, advocating for yourself becomes less about promoting yourself and more about letting your contributions be seen, because I think people don't have the visibility, so then they don't see how we add value and how they can best support us in supporting ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting because not always the most visibility necessarily also means the loudest person in the room. I think you gave some great examples of how you can do that in a certain way that feels a little more natural, and driven with the right motivators as well. So that was great. Thank you. So I guess as well with that natural unconscious bias that can occur, especially in the workplace. I know we've done a bit to try and generate a little bit of awareness around people's biases, and it does start with that self-awareness piece in particular, but it's also about sort of trying to advocate and get others to sort of have that awareness in general and quite broadly across any workplace as well. And Alice, that can be tricky in itself also. I'd love to hear your thoughts with regards to, ways that we can generate some more awareness or even maybe call out some of those biases in a way that feels constructive and that can create some real change as well. I'd love your insights.
Yeah, thanks, Talia. I feel that's a really important question because it touches on something that most people quietly experience in their careers, but they don't know how to go forward. So I think the phrase call out can sometimes make people brace for that criticism. So for me personally, I like to think about it as calling in, inviting someone into that greater awareness rather than pushing them into that corner. And in my experience, real behaviour change usually happens when people feel safe enough to reflect, not when they feel exposed. So for me, a constructive approach includes a few things. It's really important to be specific and grounded in examples. Vague statements can sometimes feel like accusations, where if we're clear, if we're observing examples, and we provide them, it helps people understand the impact without them feeling personally attacked. And that's why usually most people do shut down, is because all of a sudden they think it's about them, they don't know how to answer, they feel like they're in a corner, and so all their cortisol's rushing through their body and putting them in that fight or freeze. So second, focus on impact rather than intent. It is possible to acknowledge that harm wasn't intended while still naming that it occurred. That keeps the conversation honest but also respectful. And I also find it helpful to speak from your own perspective. So using language like, I notice or I felt concerned, that tends to keep the conversation more human and less confrontational for the other person. And when possible, if you can offer a path forward, that can be really helpful. For example, saying something like, it might help to hear from a wider range of voices before making this decision. That can also take the pressure off the individual because all of a sudden they think they've got to go into that solution mode. And in my work with individuals and team, I often see that awareness is only the first step. Real change happens when that awareness is paired with accountability and support. And ultimately it's about modelling the behaviour that we hope to see, demonstrating inclusive practices consistently so they become part of the culture and the norm. And more importantly than anything, choosing the moment matters. Not every situation requires a public audience or a public forum. Some of the most meaningful conversations happen quietly, one-to-one, where people have space to reflect without being judged or without them thinking that it's personal. And ultimately, addressing inadequately constructively is a real act and demonstration of leadership. It's a way of saying, you know what, we can do better than this, and I believe that we are capable of it as well.
Yeah, no, you're so right. It's, you know, picking the right moment, the right setting, doing it in a way that's, you know, inclusive as well. I think you've made me think about some of the conversations we've had in the past, Alice, and some of the training that you've done around effective coaching conversations as well. You know, it's one thing to say something and go with the intention of telling them one thing, but if you, to your point before, if you're listening, if you're engaging, if you're having that effective conversation where you can effectively lead them to that self-discovery themselves, that's going to be so much more impactful and meaningful for them as well. So that's some great examples there. That's really helpful. Okay, all right, so then that's a really nice segue to career progression in general for women. So I'd love your insights with regards to, you know, I think what's relevant for our industry and the time here and now, sometimes with, you know, and the tech industry in particular we know is a male-dominated industry, but those within that situation, it can sometimes create a perception of, I guess, limited options regarding their career and, you know, that horrible glass ceiling that goes with it as well. I love your insights with regards to, you know, how we can manage that perception in general as individuals.
Yeah, very good question that quite often comes up. So when I was in corporate for about 17 and a half years, I quite often heard colleagues refer to what they called a boys' club, and I'm sure a lot of us have heard it. Interestingly, though, I never really chose to engage with that narrative in a way that it shaped how I approached my work or my progression. Instead, what I would do is I would focus on building strong relationships, doing the work, and being clear about the value that I was contributing, focusing on myself. Because what I really noticed that is when we strongly hold the belief that opportunities are limited or we are being excluded, it can sometimes shape how we show up. And over time, that frustration can affect our own confidence, our way that we engage, or how even others may perceive our contributions as well. So what helped me with focusing on what was in my influence was, you know, I was very conscious on building credibility through delivery that was consistent and being proactive in developing strong professional relationships, not holding myself back, not questioning, you know, why would they want to talk to me, but putting myself out there. And most importantly, like being clear about what my aspirations were, not only to other people, but most importantly to myself, because most of us don't even stop and reflect what our aspirations are, and making sure the impact of the work is visible. You know, it's usually we talk about the effort that we do, but what about communicating, highlighting, advertising, you know, really being able to boast in a way that keeps you humble and that humility in the work that you do so other people can see it. And you know, that doesn't mean that structural barriers don't exist. In some environments, they absolutely can. But when we can focus on where we do have influence, often creates more momentum than focusing only on those perceived limitations. So, you know, if I could give one bit of advice would be to stay aware of the environment you're in, but don't allow those assumptions about ceilings to define how you approach your own growth and contributions. That would be the key.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I think it's such a great point, you know, starting intrinsically, you know, with that level of awareness about, you know, what you have control over and what your true drivers are as well. That will only feed into all of those great points about the importance of building those relationships, the awareness of how we show up, creating that level of visibility. That's all, and it only creates really meaningful impact as well. So I love it. I mean, if we think forward, so the workforce is rapidly evolving, you know, and it's changing with so many external influences. The way we work is evolving, and I'm sure there's more change to come for sure. I'm interested to know what you think, especially looking forward for the next probably 3 years, what particular skills and behaviours do you think will be most important for women leaders specifically to advance their careers?
Yeah, so one thing I often notice when these topics come up is how interconnected they are, and we quite often look for other people for support, but sometimes giving ourselves that inner guidance and support is what ends up stretching us for our success. So I believe that the future will favour leaders who are adaptable, who are self-aware, but also who are relational. Technical capability will always matter, but the ability to navigate complexity, uncertainty, and human dynamics is becoming increasingly more important. And some of the key capabilities I see emerging are emotional intelligence. That's a common one that's been around always. The ability to lead people through change. Clear communication paired with empathy. This is a real strength for women. And globally, we're seeing more women are stepping up into more higher profile roles in leadership, but also in government. And it is because of their ability to be able to demonstrate that unconditional supportive empathy. Setting healthy boundaries to prevent burnout, and the courage to make values-based decisions is also going to be important, because women leaders in particular, they often carry both high expectation and significant responsibility. So the ability to lead sustainably without losing yourself in the process is going to be absolutely critical. And I think we're also seeing a shift in leadership more broadly. Leadership is becoming less about hierarchy and more about humanity, really bringing that head and that heart stuff together, because people want to be led by individuals they trust, not just those who hold authority. And increasingly, it really is the human-centered, sustainable leadership is becoming the real differentiator compared to what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, awesome. I've just written humanity over hierarchy. I love that. How awesome. And I think, that's a really great perspective there. There's, especially with, the emotional intelligence part, there's a lot circulating, and there's been a few articles I've seen as well about the new empathetic leadership style as well, in particular, which has been really interesting to see. And I think that's a place that we naturally develop, and that feels a really comfortable space to play as well in general, which is really nice. But I also had my other big takeaway from that one as well is, yes, gosh, we can be really naturally hard on ourselves as well, absolutely. And so I think sort of keeping that balance and protecting our own space, protecting that balance, I think we're very comfortable in trying to set our own boundaries so that we can maintain that balance, and so that we have that awareness and well-being. All of that is so incredibly important, and it all contributes to how we show up. So the balance is key, isn't it? I love that. Wonderful. All really insightful. Thank you, Alice. I'm going to move to networking and sponsorship. So I'm keen to hear from the group who knows the difference between networking and sponsorship in general. If you've got a reaction for me, that's a thumbs up, that yep, I'm all over it, no problems. Or if you've got another emoji you want to flick up as well that I can just have a quick look over. Does everyone have a bit of awareness around what the two are? I'll give you a moment to respond. That's all good. Oh, yep, we've got a couple that know. Very good. Lovely. Beautiful. Okay, so for those who maybe are still a little unsure, both of them are incredibly important accelerators for our career in general, but I do want to draw attention to it because, networking specifically is a really important component. So it's obviously about the relationships that we build, the information sharing and gathering opportunities that we have. Building those professional and personal connections is all really important. The difference with sponsorship specifically is probably a different type of connection, and that's when you've got someone who's in a particularly influential position, maybe someone is in a leadership or senior position, who obviously have that visibility over your abilities and who you are, and they can advocate for you in those moments that they need to. So, for example, someone may know of you, something comes up and they say, oh yes, I'm aware of some work that Alice did on this particular project. It was a great piece of work. Absolutely happy to endorse and support whatever is the option for this individual here and now. So it's really important to sort of be mindful of, putting that concerted effort into building our network for sure, but being aware of, those sponsorship opportunities also, it all helps. And Alice, I'd love to sort of throw to you. I mean, what's your perspective about just how important this component is in particular with regards to accelerating our careers?
Yeah, and you've explained it really, really simply and well. So networking is about building connection and sponsorship is about building the momentum. So network, a good way to look at it is networking introduces you to the room. Sponsorship, however, gets you invited back into the room. So as we know, networking helps build visibility, but it is the sponsorship that often converts that visibility into opportunity. So you can have a really strong network and still not have a sponsor, and that's an important distinction. The two work together, but they're not the same. So networking creates the foundation of trust and reputation, where sponsorship tends to grow out of that trust. When someone has seen your work, understands your strengths, knows your aspirations, and as you said, Talia, is willing to advocate for you when opportunities arise, because it's not something that we can ask for directly. Sponsorship tends to develop over time as people see the value and the impact of your contributions. And there are some practical ways that we can really create those conditions or influence it. And that really goes back to, building those strong working relationships, making sure when you deliver, it's consistent, expressing your aspirations clearly, which most people are uncomfortable with doing, and it does take practice, and allowing senior leaders especially to see the impact of your work, because they will end up being your greatest sponsors, especially when it is about career progression. So it's not about like networking, it's not about collating contacts, it's about building relationships strong enough that advocacy becomes natural for you.
Yeah, very good. And do you also have some, some tips on how we can build that network in a way that really can support that progression? Do you have some insights?
Yeah. It really is about cultivating genuine relationships. It's not about having more contacts. The most supportive networks tend to build from a few simple foundations, within access of all of us to be able to do. It's mutual respect and shared values and a genuine willingness to support each other's growth. In practice, it can look like, staying curious about other people's work and their journeys, offering support before actually asking for it, and keeping in touch in ways that feel natural and organic rather than transactional. People can definitely sense the difference. And we keep going back to this, and being willing to share your own aspirations openly. This is a really challenge, especially for women. Men tend to do it well because they do it in a very practical and logical way, where women feel like, that they're boasting about themselves, they're worried about getting a big head or having that ego, because they've seen it in other people, so they shy away from talking and promoting themselves. But in my experience, most of the strongest opportunities actually come from, through those trusted relationships rather than those formal networking spaces. And diversity is also really important, and it really matters. Connecting with people from different industries, perspectives, and stages of life can expand how you think and what you see as possible. So a meaningful network doesn't just support your career progression, it also strengthens your perspective, confidence, and resilience along the way. And that is really, really, really important, especially for women who are wanting to progress, but also women who, are engaging with stakeholders and are establishing their careers. It really does play a vital role in every aspect.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and the importance of a diverse network, I think, is so important. I think because, the diversity brings that diversity of thought, and you're right, it's not just a self-fulfilling thing. It's, with a particular agenda for promotion and whatnot, a lot of the time it's that level of fulfillment, building your own confidence, building your own knowledge base, and I think that's really important. And I think sometimes networking in general can almost be like a bit of a triggering word to a degree as well. If I go back to Amy's point at the beginning of the session where scales was a triggering word for her for different reasons, I remember my perception of networking initially was, oh God, I have to go to this forum, I have to go do small talk, I have to be a people person for a really long time, it's going to be exhausting. But it's so many different avenues, and it's also quite different as far as directional as well. The matrix can be upwards, downwards, it can be across, at peer level as well. So it can actually be so much broader than what I think we initially sometimes put the lens on it also. So that was really helpful. Thank you, Alice. Okay. Look, we said we'd have some time for some additional Q&As with Alice as well. If you've got anything, pop it in the chat channel. If you'd prefer as well, more than happy for you to just flick us some questions post the forum as well. And we're more than happy to answer those questions for you outside of this forum also, if that's your preference. But if you've got anything with regards to career progression or anything that you'd like a little more insight, absolutely happy to take those questions now. Or alternatively, we can do that afterwards. While I sort of leave that time, I do want to, before I forget, do some thank yous as well. I really want to thank Alice for joining us today and being so generous with your time and providing all your words of wisdom and insights regarding this particular topic. It's been really insightful and definitely energizing for myself as well. I love talking about this. I really want to thank both Janelle and Rox, who've been working fiercely in the background as well to coordinate everything today and put it all together and to facilitate. It's been a really huge effort. Thank you to everyone for joining as well, for bringing your purple backgrounds and your fabulous selves. We really appreciate it. If there's no questions here and now, we'll take them later as well. We're more than welcome to. And thank you all for joining. Let's continue to be the brave, awesome women that we are. And we'll keep the conversation going, for sure. Thank you, everyone. Questions we can capture afterwards if there's anything additional, but there's nothing for now. So we'll just keep the conversation going. And thank you again, Alice. It was lovely to chat.
Thanks, Talia. If I could just, leave something with everybody is that, many of the challenges we've spoken about today, imposter syndrome, biases, network, that career progression, it often comes back to self-awareness and connection. And when we understand ourselves more clearly, when we communicate our aspirations openly, and when we build those genuine relationships around us, opportunities tend to expand and present. And leadership today is becoming less about having the answers and more about being thoughtful, relational, and also willing to grow. And I think that's where many women bring tremendous value into bringing that forward. So definitely encourage to put yourself out there.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, Amy, we've got a question.
I just have one. Do you think that it's possible that a lot of women are weary of leadership only because that means people management? And I feel a lot like leadership is equivalent to managing my kids. So I do that at home and I do that at work, and it gets old. So yeah. I'm just throwing it out there because I just wonder if that's hesitancy for a lot of women, because I know for me, it feels a lot of that applies.
Yeah.
Whereas guys, they, presumably wives do a lot of the management of the little people.
Yeah. Amy, it's a very valid question because women do have high expectations on themselves and they contribute in very significant ways. Sometimes you can be really, really good at your job and be exceptional in a leadership position. However, you just might not have any natural or organic interest in actually leading or managing people. Generally, people who are very excited about managing and leading people want to make a difference. They want to create that sense of belonging. They want to build those relationships. They want to do coaching and teaching. But generally, most effective leaders are very good at being strategic and insightful. They're more interested in the workplace, having that alone time or in small groups. So for organisations, it's really important to look at mapping not only our strengths, but our interests and our motivators, but what also are our needs. And that's one of the reasons I use the Berkman method, because it completely highlights that to an organisation. Because you can be in a leadership role, however, you may be limited if you're expected to manage a team, and vice versa. Very valid question. Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, good question, Amy, as well. It's so interesting because I think as parents, you make a really interesting point about, we've got that home life and then bringing some of that to the workplace. But I often find a lot of the other learnings in leadership as well, and some of the fundamentals that I've also adopted through parenting, interestingly as well, which I think more so because of what I've got wrong, but that's okay. But no, thank you for the share. That was great. Amy, is it the same topic, or I'll throw to Charlotte?
I was trying to take my hand down.
Oh, right.
Sorry.
Charlotte, you've got a question?
Yeah, Alice, I was just interested to understand how you would suggest to set those healthy boundaries, because I think that's part of what Talia was sort of talking about, and Amy to a certain degree as well, is that often women can have a huge mental load, and you have an expectation on yourself and the way to perform at work, and sometimes no matter how hard you try, you cannot do it because you have the mental load just plays out, I guess, in all facets of life, and just how you would suggest to help to set the healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
Because we have high expectations on ourselves.
Yeah, we do, Charlotte. And it's quite a battle for a lot of people that find themselves drowning before they realise that they've got to do something, about it. The key is about being intentional. It's about being aware, and it's about coming up with a plan of action before you step into the water to figure if you can swim or drown or what's going to happen, okay? Healthy boundaries, setting of healthy boundaries, we currently do that all the time, but we might not realise. How often do we have a party or a conference and we really don't want to go, and then you hear yourself saying to yourself, Charlotte, get up, get dressed and go, and surprise, surprise, you end up enjoying yourself. So it's about mapping out how you would like your ideal world, your career, your life to be. Map that out when you're not stressed, when you're very relaxed, maybe when you've been out in nature, when you're able to, tap into your own breathing without having all the distractions of all the noise and all the commitments, all the responsibilities you've got to do. When you actually map them out and intentionally say, these are my non-negotiables of what I want my life to look like, setting boundaries becomes very organic in those moments when they're needed because we put the focus on it. And it really is about parenting the self, because a lot of it is cultural driven. A lot of it is, our perceived expectations of how we look like. We might think we're being weak or inadequate or we can't do our job, but actually having the courage and the confidence and the faith to actually speak up, that's where real change happens for us, but also where we get the support from ourselves and then we start to get it from other people as well. So hopefully that's helped.
Yeah, awesome question, Charlotte, as well. The emotional load, the mental load. I think we naturally carry such a heavy load in that space. And we talk about equity. I think that's one of the big contributors as well. We bring a lot of that in our day-to-day lives. And the importance of setting those boundaries and being fearless in how we set those boundaries as well. I think, that's such a great point. Love it. Awesome. Any other questions from the group?
Recording stopped.
So now that we're stopped recording, Alice, can I ask